Item B on the agenda, Rockside Crossings at Seven Hills, LSB Seven Hills LLC, an amendment to the conceptual preliminary plan submitted and approved by the Planning Commission on November 10th, 2016. Who's here on behalf of the applicant? Feel free to come forward.
Good evening, everyone. Jeff Grafe, LSB Seven Hills. One of the partners is LSB Seven Hills. We are here for our hearing for our amended PDP plan. If you don't mind, I'll just go over it briefly, even though we did go over the joint meeting a few weeks ago, but for everyone who wasn't there. And also there were some typographical errors that we've caught in the meantime that I wanted to go over, which you guys have there. And the only new addition is the letter from the traffic engineer stating that the movement and the uses, they basically reran the calculations and that there's no changes from the original approved traffic engineer's report. And the overall utility plan, we just included that, but it's the same one that you had received the other day. A few of the change, well, so what we've done is in Block A, we're still maintaining the 40,000 square feet of commercial. Due to the requirements of our final Army Corps 404 permit, we've taken the hotel, and we don't have another place for it right now, and propose to put that in what would be our proposed Phase 2. And also, there was a driveway that was servicing that hotel that ran behind the retail. Due to some streams and wetlands that we are required to preserve in a preservation area along the eastern boundary, that driveway was removed as well. In B, Block B, we added the option of senior living, kind of an either-or, to be added to Block B. In Block E, we had added residential to it, and here's where one of the changes came in. The original PDP that was approved was for senior. When I asked them to put senior on Block B, they inadvertently removed senior from Block E. We want that to maintain as it was approved. So it's the addition of the residential on Block E. And again, another either-or scenario. One other typo that was found is in Block C. As small as that is, they actually had that listed in the chart as 40,000 square feet. It was supposed to be 4,000 square feet. So a few too many zeros there.
So the square footage developments indicated in the Block A's through E, is this all, this is all part of the plan? Is this all part of the initial phase? Or is this, so for example, you've got 460,000 square feet of senior and assisted living, Block B and E. Is that staggered over multiple phases?
Right, but the difference would be if one of the senior guys decides to build on E,
Yeah.
there's not enough room in the market, so B would more than likely be the resident. You're not going to have two different senior
Got it.
developers in the same project.
So while you have 460,000 square foot, that's why in total you only list 260,000 square feet for senior and assisted living, because you would have one or the other.
Right, so on Block E, because it's a larger parcel, they can get up to 260,000 square feet of senior. But if they built it on Block B, because it's a smaller parcel, it would be up to 200,000 square feet.
So your total category would be that first development phase, likely?
when you say first development phase, what does that?
In our last meeting, you had mentioned like a hotel as a phase 2 scenario.
That's correct.
So when I look at this, I'm trying to figure out just what's part of the phase 1, this initial build-out.
Well, we are currently almost ready to come in for our final master on A. We're developing that ourselves. And we're negotiating on B and E with other developers
Got it?
who would like to come in at the same time or very closely after us.
And your goal
So
would
we
be-
would, yeah, we would anticipate that A, B, and E would be getting developed around the same time. So let's call that phase 1.
A, B, and E. Thank you.
So I'm seeing potential for residential in B, E, and D.
That's correct.
Okay. Which is effectively pretty much, aside from the 40,000 square feet and the 4,000 in C, the entire project. So theoretically, it could all be residential.
Correct.
Yeah. How does everybody feel about that?
But I think it's got to be a combination of both our council and mayor as well as us as to what is the goal of the development as far as a monetary value. So I think that, you know, we would have an opinion and obviously planning commission would have a recommendation. We would also look to have something from the council side. This is some sort of is there a goal that we have as far as an investment bang for the buck as far as development, seeing as this is a fairly big piece of the city?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I do know that we're still anticipating new revenue numbers from LSB, and I'm wondering what the status of that is.
Do you know, Mr. Mayor?
Do we know when Ryan will have the rest of that done? Part of the reason it's hold up is we are negotiating contracts on the other two, so depending on who does what and who's going to build what, we've kind of been slow to finalize numbers to give to you guys on that. I would keep in mind though, and I understand what you all are asking, and everyone would probably like to see more commercial, but if you've been by the site now that it's cleared, you know, the B line basically starts at the top of that hill. And so anyone who's commercial is going to want themselves to be visible from Rockside Road, which it can be done, but now you're talking almost 700 feet back from the road. So I think we've done our best to bring in as many different possibilities. But there is that potential where those D, B, and E could be all residential
And that's,
of different mixes, townhomes, single family.
I think that's what concerns me. I don't know that we don't, I don't know how everybody else feels, but I don't know that we want all residential there. I mean, I think we're going a completely different direction than what we originally expected. So I'm not crazy about allowing residential in all of those. That's my humble opinion. I don't know how everybody else feels about it.
I would mirror those same feelings about the residential as well. Another concern I had was, you know, earlier on we had the main entrance lining up with Lombardo, and now I see the main entrance lining up with Mural, which I would assume would mean a new traffic light there.
Yeah, we've always had our main entrance for our project off of Mural. That's how the original PDP got approved as well. The original traffic study has us putting in a four-way intersection there, as well as a right-hand turn lane, and doing modifications at Crossview and Rockside as well.
Any other questions before we continue on this issue? No? Since you brought up the entrance, I guess there's been a lot of scuttlebutt about this road here. Got a couple letters, I think this morning? Did those come this morning, Terry? With respect to that, but prior to even getting those letters, I know I had a concern with respect to that road, and maybe we can address that, because I'm concerned about the city's position with respect to their property, and how that road's going to go. And I'm assuming that's what you want to talk about. Yeah, okay. So I tend to agree with your position, but maybe we can give Jeff an opportunity to address that.
Which road are we talking about, Mural?
The one down
Opposite
by
Lombardo.
opposite Lombardo. Yeah.
That's the CT,
So the entrance on the city piece.
the city piece.
What are? Have you seen any of these letters? Was that curiosity? Probably not, right? Okay.
I believe he just received it 5 minutes ago, my
Okay.
attorney. I have not seen the letter, though.
So what's the? I guess we need to resolve that issue one way, in a way that's not going to adversely impact the city.
So it's our understanding the city still owns this property, and there's when we read the CT consultant's letter, it's generally from the eastern partial developer that's looking for some discussion related to the location of that road and the traffic associated with it. Is that correct?
The location is one element.
Yeah, and I saw some traffic discussion as well. So I'm
We haven't
assuming
seen this letter.
I don't know I haven't seen the letter.
Haven't seen it,
you guys haven't seen it, it was just passed out today.
no. Does anybody have extra copies of it? Neither one of us do.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're good. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if this was on the agenda.
No, so effectively what happened is these letters came in this morning regarding the concern about the road. And it was a concern that I had prior to even getting the letters. But I think Mr. Ritchie's going to comment, so go for it.
Yeah.
I don't see it on the agenda.
Go ahead, Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Alan Ritchie. I'm outside counsel to LSB. And I think just to talk a little bit about the road and kind of to Mr. Lobitz's point as to whether this is an issue for tonight's Planning Commission meeting. You know, just to step back, you know, there is an approved preliminary development plan right now for the development. It was approved, and what we're really doing tonight is coming forward to amend that plan. The approved preliminary development plan that LSB has, there is no access road off of Lombardo. What's shown on the approved plan that you know we have is an access point. And just to step back and give a little bit of history, probably as a precursor to Mr. Hart's presentation tonight, I think that this road has become an issue if we step back and think about how it came to be. Originally there was a site plan that was produced, a conceptual site plan that was produced a year ago. And that conceptual site plan showed a road coming from Lombardo, crossing into LSB-owned property at a time when the city was going to convey the property to LSB. And offers were made for the property between LSB and I think the developer to the, I guess it's the east, for the property. And it was eventually decided that the LSP offer would be rejected and negotiations would commence with the developer to the east. And that's fine. At that point, LSB said, well, we're going to proceed with our development and do our preliminary plan. LSB's traffic study never contemplated any drive to Lombardo. It never did. LSB's traffic study took care of all of its traffic only through Mural Drive, and then a right in and right out off of the front of Rockside, off the front of the development. And we did that intentionally because we weren't going to own the city parcel. The city owns the city parcel. The city parcel is not part of anybody's preliminary development plan right now. It's not part of the approved plan from LSB, and it's not part of the approved plan from Glenn's Landing. The city piece is not part of either development right now. So I think that should there be an access way, I think the traffic engineers actually have absolutely talked about doing that. We don't disagree that there should be one. The question is, we have no control over where that road is. We have no control over when it gets done because we don't own the property. We don't have a contract to buy the property. So we have no way of doing any of this. So our plan has been approved for access point. So we said, if and when this road ever gets constructed, this is where we are planning in our project we would have access. Like I said, we've got our preliminary plan approved. We've already done all of our engineering. We've already done all of our permitting. We've started clearing and doing some site work. We've already leased buildings of where they go on our site. So it's not like we can just change where this road goes because we did all of that in reliance upon the preliminary plan that we had. Now our PUD that we did together contemplates changes. It contemplates them. Changes like, well, what's going to be built here and when? What's going to be built over here? What's going to be built over there? And I think that's why we're here tonight, is only to discuss those issues. So what LSB is, they're doing is they're not amending where this access road's going or where it could be or should be, because they just don't have a dog in that hunt. They're not negotiating to buy the land. They are simply saying, if and when the land or that road gets put in, this is where we can do it now that we've already started our development. So it's really not before us, I don't think, the road issue. We've asked planning to look at changes in use, because now we're talking about a phase 1 and a phase 2. And with respect to that issue, I think I can address it just really quickly. LSB has every intent to do the fully developed development that they had originally shown. So the economic studies and all those things, it is fully their intent to do that. The big difference in the development right now from phase 1 to phase 2, there's no way to put the hotel on the property that they have. There's just no way to do it. So the hotel basically has been moved to phase 2. But from an economic impact study, actually, and we absolutely can demonstrate this, the residential, the single family homes actually produces a much bigger bang for the economic buck than anything else. The residential in the back, based on our projections, is a $22 million development in the back. That is a huge driver of the economics. So when we look at this revised phase 1 and phase 2 plan, and right now we're showing you basically phase 1. And phase 2 will include some of the land that we have, and we might have to acquire a little more for eventually to put the hotel. But when you put this development, any of the combinations of what you're seeing as phase 1, and then the hotel, which would be part of phase 2, your economic impact is almost exactly the same number that we are looking at with the full impact that we show with the full development. Because that's how development works. You have a site, you do a conceptual site plan, this is what you'd like to do. This is really what we'd like to do. But you're kind of doing it it's a flat piece of paper. You don't know exactly where your permitting is going to lead you. You don't know where all the rock is on the site. So things change and move. But what LSB is doing is they're maximizing what they can do today. They can't put a hotel in there today, physically. So what they're trying to do is maximize the site for everybody. And eventually, when the hotel comes in, if it comes in, based on market conditions and everything else, the economic impact for the city will be the same as it's always been shown. So that's kind of what, they're trying to accomplish here with just getting this amended. Because they've moved some uses around to reflect kind of market conditions, the site conditions, the permitting conditions. So they had to basically move the hotel out of phase one. And that's really all this amendment is truly about.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
I'm sorry, I thought you were going to ask a question.
Not yet.
You had that gasp,
Yeah, I know.
that inhale. I heard you inhale, so I thought I'd give
And I
give you
did
a
as
stop.
well. You're absolutely right.
So, in any event, so I think, the point of what we're trying to do is there's some moving parts in parts B and E. There are some moving parts based on the negotiations that are ongoing. So whether there's going to be senior living in E and/or senior living in B, they can't tell today.
Sorry, keep going.
Almost.
I'm just holding back, I apologize.
So what we're doing here is we're talking about use. And so is there a possibility that B could be all residential and E could be all residential and D could all be residential? The answer to that is true because that's what the market would demand and that's what the site is going to permit. We can't get retail and office buildings on B, E, and D. We can't do that for a bunch of reasons. Why no one wants to lease that back there. We've figured that out for the last 50 years with the site. Also, we have residents to think about. The residents that are there today. Putting a retail center and, office buildings back in E, I don't think that the residents really want that back there. So they're kind of respecting all of those things within the PUD, and that's kind of how we're planning the site. And so basically this is, based on what we know we have going on right now, this preliminary plan would allow us to do the deals that we've been negotiating for the last couple of months. And that's really the reason we're here for the amendment, is obviously we've moved some things to a phase two, just because physically the hotel, and there's just no market demand for a hotel right now in this site. And that's kind of the basis for the changes.
So you've moved some things to what you're not calling a phase two, but we've never had any, we don't know what phase two is going to be, obviously. But even more so, I mean, what effectively now can happen in D, E, and B is it's all residential, no senior living, no assisted living, whatever you want to call that. And that's what concerns me, frankly, because it's going to become, and I understand you can't necessarily put retail back there, but, I mean, this just opens the door to develop it all residentially.
Well, I would keep in mind that two things. Actually, a single-family home development in E, economically, for real estate taxes, income taxes, because of the residents that you're creating, actually has a better economic impact for the city than senior living does.
And I think that's one of the things that interests me is because we have such a disproportionate revenue generation model in Seven Hills from property versus the income tax. I think the goal is obviously to develop the parcels. That's the goal of, I think, of a lot of folks here. But I think the best bang for the buck is kind of what we're looking at as well. So I think to have those numbers and to go through them is a good first step. So I think that's probably the next step that we'll want to see is what those numbers are.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm going to need to be convinced that residential is going to generate more funds than the other uses, because I've always understood it to be exactly the opposite. So, for what it's worth, yeah.
I respect the request. We absolutely can do that. I would say two things. The requirements under the PUD to amend a preliminary plan, what's needed to be submitted, do not include economic impact studies. The economic impact study was done
I understand
for the
that.
city
Yeah.
by LSB with respect to the PUD, to get the PUD put in place. I would say that council absolutely should and will look at the economics, and we'll produce that. We can produce that information.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with that it's not required. If, from my perspective, if you want an approval, I'd like to see it.
Okay, that's
So,
fine.
I don't know how, but, I mean, what does the rest of the board have to say? I'm not trying to hijack that position, so, I mean,
Yeah, I
What do we
think that, when you look at the first phase that we went through with the planned unit development and the agreements, there was a lot of working with your team. And I think that to have all of that information in front of us to help us make the best decision possible, given the fact that this is where we're at with this development, this is one of the last pieces of development possibility within the city, I think it's just, everybody wants to make sure that we're making the right decision. That's my opinion, I guess.
anybody else?
Fair enough.
Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, more information the better. But I also see his point as to where we're at in this process.
The one thing I would just add
And
real
what we're
quick,
responsible
and
for.
totally respect, the request from planning. By removing the hotel from this phase, that is the most significant difference. That's the most significant difference. What you will see in the new economic projections, I have a draft sitting in front of me right here, is it will be nowhere near what you saw, because out of the $589,000 per year that was from the fully developed LSB site, and I would just like to make that point quickly. You saw an economic impact study only from the LSB site. You didn't see one dealing with any of the property going to the corner. I don't remember ever seeing one, and maybe there certainly could be, I'm not saying that there wasn't, of what's going to happen potentially on the city piece, what could possibly happen on Glenn's Landing piece. All of that, the only economic studies that I've ever seen have dealt with LSB's fully developed site, which included a hotel. So out of the $589,000, and I'm going to use rough numbers here, so don't hold me to them, please. Out of the 500, you're basically taking 300 some thousand out because of the hotel. Most of it generated from the hotel tax. That's just reality. So no matter what we do with the site that's left that we can't put a hotel on, it's not going to look like the numbers that you saw because the hotel's not there. So whether it's assisted living, senior living, single-family homes, all those numbers are going to be pretty much right in the same ballpark. And we'll prove that. We'll show that to you. I will show it to you. But I'm just saying, my foreshadowing here is that people will see this phase one produces $200,000 of benefit for the city. Phases 1 and 2, which are basically just bringing the hotel back in, you're back up to $550,000 for the city because of the hotel tax. But you're either going to have a hotel or you're not. I mean, we can't promise one today. Their intent is fully to do one. They would love to do one.
Right.
The reason Louis Beck got involved in this project from the very beginning was to do a hotel here. The market's just not there yet. And it physically can't go on what they have today. So maybe they're going to have to acquire a little land over there. Maybe they have to acquire a little bit of land over there to do the hotel eventually, but that's their intent. That's what Mr. Beck does. He develops hotels.
Absolutely. And this might be too much to ask, but can we get, like I said, it might be too much to ask, but can we get some idea of what the intent is with phase 2?
It is everything that's not shown today that was in our original plan, which is basically, I think it was the hotel and more commercial. How much more commercial was? So more commercial and the hotel.
So the mixed-use piece has been modified, and I remember, I apologize, I remember the discussion was The apartments on top of the mixed use have changed. But the total amount of the retail has been changed as well.
Well, I think in Block A, that has never changed. It was always 40,000 in Block A.
Okay.
And it's what's changed is we couldn't put
The hotel.
the residential on top of the retail and then the hotel.
Got
So the apartments that were on top of retail, you know, are also not in this phase one. You know, I mean, if apartments were possible, these economic projections would look a million times better. But they're not. We're only allowed to put them on top of retail, which we can't do in Block A.
And what, I thought,
Is it just for economics?
I'm sorry?
It's just because it doesn't work with the deal? It just, okay,
Up in the front, exactly.
got it.
do you already own the land for phase 2 or no?
Some of it,
Some of
some
it?
of it. So I would say, for example, you know, C, and there's a number of houses that LSB owns that are not even shown colored here at all. But there's definitely a need to acquire more land going that way. I mean, there's just no question about it. We can't fit the hotel on this piece right now. So we're going to have to push it over to this C that I think we changed to 4,000 feet. There's the typo, 40,000 to 4. And so eventually, we'll have to acquire more land over there. But right now, because of the way the site is, if you've seen it, and where the rock is and all those other things, you can't, and the protected wetland areas and the streams, you can't put the hotel where we originally thought we might be able to. Because again, you're looking at a conceptual plan based on it was a flat piece of paper, you know, hoping for the best. And that's how you maximize a site for a city and for a developer. You get into it, you learn what you can do, you learn what people are interested in, what they're not, what the market responds to, and what you physically can get done. And some of the permitting that ended up coming forward, you know, we couldn't keep that crossroad in, and we can't put the hotel right there. And plus, it's just not time for a hotel.
There was another interesting point that you had brought up earlier. When we had our previous discussion, the economic forecast didn't allow for the development of the hotel piece, which is clearly understandable. But you had mentioned that also that was it wetlands based of where the garage and the hotel were going to be, which is why you couldn't bring that road down. Is that so? There's kind of a two-headed monster there.
Exactly. I mean, the site, if you've seen the site, that's where it falls, and that's where that protected stream is now.
So the original PUD, the thought was that that development could work with the hotel and the garage. The topography was known, but it was just some additional information that came back through the Army Corps, or is that just continuation of the development of the whole process?
Yeah, I think it was just continuation of the process, and the permitting wasn't finalized. But I think more so it's just a matter of when you really start digging into rock, cuts, everything else, and, you know, where things can be built, you know, that the hotel
It's a
just...
tough build.
Yeah, it's too tough.
So the reason I'd asked if you had actually owned the property, because in a perfect world, what would have been nice is a plan that showed phase 1 and phase 2 in its entirety, conceptually, but you can't really do that since you don't own all the pieces to the puzzle yet.
No, nor can we promise.
No, I
You know,
got you.
we're just being very straightforward and upfront here. I mean, phase 2 is fully their intent to do, but, you know, they can't promise that they're going to be able
Yeah,
to buy the land, and they can't
No, no,
promise that.
I'm just saying, if you did have it, it would have been nice to have.
Absolutely.
You know, so we can actually see it, and that's
But what I'm hearing,
unfortunate that they can't.
the phase 2 concern is, you know, this is a great piece of land for the city. It's an important piece of land, so economically, you want to make sure that you're doing the best you can. And I can tell you that's what my client thinks as well. They're trying to do the best they can with the site that they have. You know, if we could snap our fingers and make this a perfectly flat site, they would have a site there in the middle for the hotel, and they would keep it there, and when the hotel was ready, that's what they would do. But that's not what they've got, and that's not what the market is going to let them do.
Can you repeat one more time why you weren't going to be building apartments above the retail in that A. I didn't
Yeah, if you
quite
want to talk
catch
about
that.
the cost, I don't know the cost issues as well. It's,
When we brought in our GC, we started to do cost estimates based on buildings that they had built over retail, kind of modeled certain buildings, and looking at what the possibility for rent was. The cost just far exceeded making it work over retail. You know, if we were building standard apartments or building them over a parking podium, that's one thing, but the cost to do it over retail was too, we just can't get the rents to justify the cost of construction to build it in that fashion.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood that. Okay. Any other questions so far? I don't want to.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
You know, I think, from my own perspective, we've got revised drawings that we received back in March, which we were asked to consider, and then tonight, we've got another set of revised drawings to consider. And I guess the problem where I'm having trouble is that we're being asked to amend or approve, or whatever the proper term is, still nothing concrete, which is very difficult for me on a personal level to be able to approve things that aren't concrete. It's just what just what I see. But, you know, we started with a main plan back a year ago, had a lot of bells and whistles, and now we've come, like I say, a month ago, and a lot of changes were made to that, and then tonight we have further changes. We're being asked to approve on if-comes, which I think is very difficult, at least for me, to make decisions.
Terry, the difference between the plan, I threw a bunch of stuff in there because I kind of started over for those that hadn't been here a month ago when we had the joint session. The only two differences in the plan from the one that you received then, or you received in your packet for distribution, between then and now is in C where there was an extra zero, it went from 40,000 to 4,000. And when I had asked the draftsperson to put senior living on B, he erased it from E, which had already been approved on E. So that's all we did was add back the little circle that says senior living and the little egg shape, and put the 260,000 back up in the chart as an option for E, which was already approved. So really what's new is we're asking to also that use be allowed in B if needed.
Well, that's okay, but my impression was, excuse me, is that there would be senior living in E or B, and now we're looking at basically residential, potential for residential in E and B. I remember the discussion was the plot was too big in E, we're looking to move it to B, and that's my recollection of the conversation, because it was too much property, if I recall. So the conversation was, we'll move the residential to E and the assisted or senior living to B, but now that doesn't seem to be the case. I could be wrong, but that's my impression.
No, the conversation was, we have others that we are speaking with. They didn't need the size of E for their type of senior living product. That's why we're also trying to get it, to give them an option. Some guys want B, some guys want E. We're trying to keep it as flexible so that we can maximize, you know, what gets developed on the site.
But we could wind up with two parcels of residential, is what you're also saying.
Absolutely, and if,
Okay,
and,
that's
three
and
parcels.
Terry, if
Fairness,
there was a market for more than one senior living, you could end up with two different senior living operators, but everyone's telling me that that's not the case, especially with the one just getting approved in Independence.
Well, I understand, but I remember all the initial conversations as well, when we made approvals for initial plans, and those have obviously changed dramatically. The hotel, the commercial on Rockside Road, which is now a parking lot. I mean, it's substantially different.
But the commercial
than a
you
year
approved
ago.
was 40,000 square feet. We did not change the size of the commercial. And the project that we're bringing in is right at around 40,000 square feet, the one that we're bringing in for final master plan approval in a few weeks.
So you made a comment, if there were a market for 2 senior living facilities, but I don't think anyone's saying they want to see a senior living on B and E, so why?
No, I was saying if there was a market for 2, in response to, yes, you could end up with both residential on B and E. If there was a market for more senior, you could also end up technically with senior living on E and B as well.
I got
We
you.
don't feel that that's the case with those that we're working with. And we definitely know there's not room for 2 different senior projects. We've seen their studies and their reports.
So you're working with someone right now for senior living on B?
We have some offers on B and also on E.
I'm sorry, the second one? E?
We have offers on E as well.
Any other questions? Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
are you asking any questions of anyone?
Sure.
I think that this would be a good time to just clarify some language that's on your plan. And again, because it's come up with all of you talking about the uses, I see that you have added, this was back in March, you added the definition at the bottom, mixed use means, on the bottom left of the drawing. Okay. And just, there is no definition in the ordinance for mixed use, but I
Correct.
understand you're using that to identify things on here. And you have 2 circles, one in A and one in C, that are termed mixed use. And presumably then, this definition you're using would apply in both of those blocks.
Correct.
And then at the top left of the drawing, you have mixed-use commercial, which, what is that intended to mean?
Retail and office,
Okay.
likely.
But it could
Like a
mean-
Raymond James is office, it's not really retail, so it's mixed use.
So referring down to the bottom definition, so it could be any of those things on the bottom, including
Correct.
government, residential, elder care, but...
Yeah, because we don't have a mixed-use definition, and so instead of writing every one of those words in that block, I just used that definition because it would be easier.
I understand in block A and C, but then when you identify 40,000 square foot at the top of your plan?
Yep.
So you're saying it's going to be commercial or retail, but it could be anything on the bottom, right? Technically,
Yeah, office,
it could be
retail,
residential or
commercial.
elder or
Yeah, it's mixed
governmental.
use.
Okay, just so the planning commission sees that. I mean, it's a little bit, could pose a problem in the future. I just want everybody to be on the
Fair
same
enough.
page.
So, based on this definition, you could have residential on this entire project, theoretically, right? Because you've got
With the wording.
residential, based on that definition, which I hadn't even seen until you pointed out, actually. So mixed use means office, retail, or other commercial, residential, government, goes on, or any any combination of the foregoing. So theoretically, A, B, C, D, and E could all be residential.
And that's permitted under the PUD.
I got you, but I'm just saying,
Is that what we want to do? No, of course not.
no.
And that's not, but that's the point is exactly right. I mean, it could be, we could come and ask to put an apartment building, or, sorry, I can't do that, actually. An office building on A. We could absolutely just do an office building on A.
Sure.
We could do just retail on A, or we could mix any of those things on A. So the point is that they are thinking that they're going to mix them, though, and when they come in for their final plan, it'll be mixed use, mostly office and retail.
But this isn't the definition that we have.
The ordinance does not have a definition for mixed use.
Right.
But all of these uses are noted as permissible.
Right,
And
but-
so they've used that term because they didn't want to list specific uses in those blocks. And I understand that, so that means any of those uses could be in a final. But when you use mixed-use commercial at the top left also, I'm wondering,
Well, it's
maybe you
40,000
should just say
feet.
mixed use. Or
Oh,
commercial.
so
You
you
know
see
what I
the
mean?
word
That's why
commercial
it's-
is,
Is that intended
well, I
to
guess it
mean
is
something
commercial.
else? In other words, the mixed-use commercial at the top left, is that the intention to mean something other than commercial or other than the mixed-use
no, it's just
definition?
mixed use.
Okay, so it's plain old mixed use?
Yeah,
Using
yeah,
your
just-
definition?
Yeah,
Okay,
mixed use in the circle on A, and then mixed use in the definition.
Okay.
But you're right, maybe that word commercial could be deleted.
That was my question, to how to make it clear as to what you're intending.
Yeah, and that's the, it was just, that was in the approved one. It already said that, so we just left it.
So if you have a mixed-use area, are you required to have more than one use, or you can just have any one of those uses?
Well, I think that term mixed use is used very loosely. It only appears in one place on the ordinance, and that's on, let's see here, on page 4. If anybody has it, it's in 97905, and it just says Development Plan Review Standards. It says that the preliminary plan shall contain uses that are permitted, and such uses may be mixed. And it's referring to the specifically identified uses, so commercial, retail, office, housing. So.
But it doesn't have to be mixed, is what I'm trying to understand.
No, in other words, the mixed word comes in because the entire planned unit development area is allowed to have mixed, a combination of uses.
But it's not required to have
It's
a
not
mixed
required,
combination of uses.
but it's allowed in this ordinance.
Right.
So they're just indicating, and I understand in A and in C, that, they're not identifying which of those mixed uses. It could be any one of those number. But then as you're all talking, I saw up at the top the mixed-use commercial, and I wanted to just make it clear for you and for us what we're talking about.
Got it?
Okay.
Anybody else? All right, let's get to the bottom of this issue that was raised by CT, is it CT? But just hash that all out, because I'm trying to understand it, and I'd like to understand it. And I know, Alan, you've said it doesn't, and I know what you've said, but ultimately, we are dealing with things that are going to be happening in the future that might potentially behoove us to look at what we have now and ultimately dealing with what we have in the future as well, if that makes sense.
Before that jumps on, and I had asked the question earlier, is there anything set with that property? Is that property still the property of Seven Hills?
Yes.
You're talking about this
There
down
is,
here?
yeah, there is
Okay.
no intent, no letter of intent signed for any agreement.
Say that again, Aaron?
There is no letter of intent agreement in place.
There is no agreement
There's
at
no
this point in
agreement.
time with
I-
regard to the sale
but
of that property.
The reason I'm hesitating is there are ongoing discussions.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, we're not privy to the negotiations there that I think are ongoing. I think, and I haven't read the letter in any detail. I think it has mainly to do with the need for an access road and then the alignment of that road. And the only thing I would be able to comment on right now, Mr. Chairman, is that I think there's a comment there is that's where it needs to be aligned, the street. And what I would comment is that the city's engineer has said the opposite. The city's engineer has commented that where the road is completely drawn on the city piece and connects to where we have it connecting to is absolutely appropriate. Neff, our engineer, has said it's absolutely appropriate. So, like I said, I haven't read this report at all in any kind of detail. All I know is that the city's engineer and our engineer have said something to the contrary, that it doesn't need to be aligned there. And I would also comment that the way that it's, I think, drawn, and there's an exhibit attached to that letter, again, I just flipped through it quickly. The way that it's drawn, it actually does go right through our detention basin on our property. So it would be,
The way that what's drawn. The way, can you tell me, I lost you, the way that what's drawn?
I forget the comment is on the CT.
Oh.
Here. You overlay that.
Okay. Yes, I got you, okay.
This way.
Okay. Okay. I got you. Did you want to say anything else, Alan?
no, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Floor is
Is it
yours.
okay for me to make some comments?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm David Hart, Senior Advisor, Planning Services for CT Consultants. One of the letters is from me to the chair, and the second letter was actually at the request of the Glenn's Landing team to provide a second opinion regarding the traffic engineering and the appropriateness of the Lombardo Center as a second major access off of Rockside Road. And so my comments are actually focused on that issue and why it's important to address that issue at the preliminary plan stage. Yes, I agree, this is important for Glenn's Landing to have that access, but I don't think it's out of whack to say that that's important for Rockside Crossing, and it's important for the city for a whole lot of circulation reasons, interconnections, and so forth. The reason it's important to be resolved now is because the resolution of that access point and how it comes onto the city property and through the city property can affect preliminary plan layouts. And those layouts ought to be resolved now with an understanding of what the future access was going to be. I thought when we looked at the preliminary plans from our side and the preliminary plans from that were originally approved from the Rockside Crossing side, that these were resolved. But neither, and Mr. Ritchie is technically correct. We could not show that access on either preliminary plan. We couldn't show it on ours. They couldn't show it on theirs because we didn't have land control. But it's clear by the design of their plan, it's clear by the design of our plan, and it's clear by the city's intention that that road was expected to be a second access to these combined developments. We used for our traffic study that was prepared last December, we used the same, for efficiency purposes, we used the same traffic engineer that Rockside Crossings had used, TMS. And in their study, the December 1st study, they concluded that the Lombardo Center extension as the second major access along with Mural Road extension was the best scenario for the combined properties. They also recommended that there be some internal connection between the two major developments, Glen Landings and Rockside Crossings. And they also said that the Lombardo Road extension was better than if we were going to go through the City of Independence and use Oak Tree and add traffic coming out on Oak Tree and add to the volume of left turns, which was going to make that road much more difficult to use. So I think it's safe to say that it's in the public interest. Yes, it's in the private interest too, but it's in the public interest that there be a second access and there be a sound traffic management plan. Actually, one section in the zoning code, 979.13 design standards, sets as a goal to integrate safe, convenient, and comfortable internal and external circulation patterns. Well, both of those apply in this matter, both from the access off of Rockside Road as well as providing the interconnection between the the two projects. The second letter, the one from, so this solution was confirmed by TMS when we did our traffic study in December. And the second letter from Tammy Hughes, professional traffic engineer from CT, basically confirmed that it's important in the public interest to line up the streets across from Ural and across from Lombardo Center, and to provide interconnected access from three standpoints. One, the distribution of traffic, which makes it easier to figure out you go in the path of least resistance if you have two major distribution points on Rockside, for convenience and for safety for emergency vehicles. And then the last point in her letter was concluding, and we knew this, that the eastern access point without the Lombardo extension did not work very well. And so having this connection, and I might add, and I forgot to say this earlier, that the original approved plan by Rockside Crossing, as I said, had the stub coming as far as it could to the city property, couldn't go onto the city property. Our plan and our envision was also that we would have that connection from the Lombardo extension. That was the original plan. That was the original envision. The city actually thought that was important, and I referred in the letter to a conversation at the Planning Commission meeting in January 5th, which said negotiations were ongoing and presumably were to be closed to make sure this access could be provided by the private sector across their property. So what's happened in the revised plan is that the plan, both the overall development plan and the first phase plan, which is the commercial portion in A, the first phase plan that I saw in the package, basically is turning its back or relegating this access to a very, very minor or service drive position. Because it's coming straight out, it's assuming that the connection with the Lombardo extension will go straight through the city property. And basically, the connecting drive is a service drive next to the retention basin, maybe going through part of it, next to the retention basin, and behind the commercial properties, which is in effect the service drive. It has very little relationship to a full connector street that is supposed to integrate the two developments. So it's designed like it's not needed or not important as a second access. The other point to make, and it's made in the letter, that there are some economic issues with how this, if Glenn's Landing were to be the purchaser of this property, then there are some economic consequences to the city depending upon that alignment. If it has the curved alignment that is exhibited in, or illustrated in Exhibit 2 attached to my letter, then you have some development parcels. That means two things. One, you can sell it for more money, and you can get a tax return from development of that parcel. And I think it's fair to say that economic development is a legitimate and valid public interest objective for the city to aspire to achieve. So, in summary, the originally approved preliminary development plans for both sides, assuming, as envisioned, the connection to Lombardo was in the public interest. That plan was in the public interest, including the circulation. The revised plan is turning its back on that circulation concept, and it basically compromises two legitimate, important public interest objectives: sound traffic management and economic development or tax base. And as I said before, confirming the reality of this road and whether it's going to happen and its alignment at this point is in the public interest with respect to best practices in traffic management, interconnection and convenience and safety, which is alluded to, or not alluded to, mentioned in Tammy Hughes' letter. And how this is resolved will influence the layouts of these preliminary development plans and obviously influence how the traffic circulation and management and the development plans impact the city. So we request that the revised plan for Rockside Crossings be tabled until this issue of circulation and how it affects the preliminary development plan, particularly for the first phase, be tabled. And we're assuming, I'm assuming anyway, that yes, the zoning code has a whole lot of flexibility in what you can do, but the preliminary development plan is the developer's interpretation to the city of what they expect to do under the flexibility of the development plan. So it's tightening it up. And so we're assuming that the first phase is a retail development as it's been depicted on one of the illustrative sketches in the application before you. So we're basing these comments on that plan and the revised overall development plan related to the access and that first phase site plan as it's related to the access as well. Thank you. I'll wait for questions if you have any.
Questions? Anyone?
Just a comment, it seems as though that there's always been discussions of access to Rockside from a road at that location. And the discussion is how the road now winds between properties. And it seems to me that I'm not exactly sure why that's in front of Planning Commission. That seems like that would be a deal if you're trying to put a purchase plan in place for that property, that would be a discussion between the city and you, or you and the other development and the city as part of whatever deal that comes into place.
But again, it was envisioned that this was going to happen, and the two plans were designed assuming this was going to happen. Knowing that and having that circulation is one of the major fundamental issues that you ought to address in a preliminary development plan phase. And so that's why I think it's important to address it now. And again, this is for the private sector interest, but it's also for the city's interest because circulation is, as I said, a very important public interest objective.
So I'd like to see nothing more than both groups succeed and the city prosper. Why can't we get to a point where we're all on the same page with respect to this issue?
I guess my client is willing to buy it,
Yeah.
as the city said they're willing to sell it. I think that's a fair. And obviously, I'm assuming the conversations between Glenn's Landing and the city, the value of that property has been predicated on an alignment. And that's where my point in the letter is. If that alignment must change, then the economic value in terms of the purchase price is going to change, and the return to the city in terms of future.
Because the roadway would extend too much on the property.
You wouldn't get developable sites.
And
But to Mr. Ritchie's point, they're not addressing the road at all in what they presented to us now.
That's my point. But they did in the earlier plan, even though they couldn't show it on city property because neither of us could because we didn't have interest in that property. But it was envisioned, it was expected.
So how could
And it was designed to accommodate it that way.
So how could it have changed if he's not showing it?
The connections never changed.
The roadway alignment, if you look at their earlier plan, comes right down and has a stub coming right to where the curved road goes through the city property. It doesn't go onto the city property. You look at the, not the current plan, but you have to look at the approved plan.
But he's saying it didn't change. Are you saying it did?
It did change. Yes.
He's referring to this property here.
Okay.
I have a copy of the approved drawing. Do you have a copy of it with you, Alan?
I don't have the old.
Here's a copy of the plan.
Right. So what changed?
This is something that Terry had, this is,
Here, let's go through it from our engineer.
They're basically not
We're
showing
looking
the
at, our
road.
engineer had drawn out, at one point in time, maybe a few months ago, both developers had proposed where they thought a road should go and how it should connect, and that's what they're looking at.
planning commission solves this problem.
Well, no, I don't disagree with you, but it is a problem that ultimately has to, I don't know either. So, can you tell me how much, what I'm looking at here?
Yeah, okay, here, these are from me, let me just take them back. Okay. Our engineer, wait, can I have that one back here? Our engineer, at one point in time, the two developers were talking and we're gonna work together or work with our engineer in proposing where they each thought that the road should go. And our engineer has these two drawings. This is LSB Developers' proposed drawing where it went straight up the city property along the eastern border of your property. And
That's the,
and then here is the,
This is the Glenn's Landing. That's what we submitted because we
these are Glenn's Land, these are not, our engineer provided those to me just to show me what everybody was talking about.
That's the road right there, going through there.
And now it's
This one
not.
shows where Glenn's Landing wanted it to go over.
Right.
And then I thought this one showed where LSB wanted it to go, you know, here. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I'm looking at the wrong thing, never mind.
But this road is gone right here, right?
Right, because it's a street,
So-
second street.
Well, then this is not it, because LSB would like it to go straight. Oh, here it is, this black border was LSB's idea, no? I mean, you didn't draw this, but our engineer superimposed.
That's
This is
reflective
the
of that.
approved preliminary plan.
Right,
So we showed, just because we didn't know where we connected, we showed
that little turnaround.
a small turnaround, but this is right here, this little angled drive. So the street would come in on the city piece and connect to this cul-de-sac, is what we showed. Right? But what his client is saying is that the road should come in right here, and so he can access his property over here.
And travel over
It's not
here.
connecting right here.
if it did, that'd be fine. We're okay with that.
All right, anyways, guys, let's have a seat. Let's have a seat. You guys can talk outside. I would ask that you do try to work it out. It would make more sense. We can do one of two things. We can, do we want to wait for those numbers, guys?
Terry.
Do we want to wait for those numbers?
You know,
Yeah. I think to make a sound decision, we do need those numbers. Fair enough?
one other thing on this is, you know, back when we hired, the city hired the consultant to study that whole area, probably 2 years ago, you know, they stressed interconnectivity for that whole development. Of course, we didn't have two property owners then, but, you know, clearly interconnectivity doesn't seem to be happening. Whether or not it's needed or the development or the land allows it is, you know, could all be reasons, but I just wanted to make that point, getting back to that study that they paid for back then.
Okay. Anybody Anybody else? Terry, you have anything to say? Terry McCafferty and Mr. McCafferty?
No, I don't think so at this moment, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lobus?
Nope.
Can we get those numbers?
Can, will we be able to tell from those numbers, like alternatives? So in other words, if E or B would contain senior living versus E or B having all houses built on it?
Absolutely. It'll assume
Okay,
certain things. Yep.
thank you.
Is there any chance these two groups can communicate without acrimony?
Of course. Love to, of course.
You both say that so positively.
No, I really would. I'd like to work it out for everybody.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else you guys want to add? Mayor, of course, Mr. Mayor, please come forward.
Richard Dell'Aquila, 661 East Pleasant Valley Road, Seven Hills, Ohio. I'd like to offer our good offices here in Seven Hills, if we can assist in a meeting of the parties to try to bring some of these contentious issues to a conclusion, I'm willing to mediate and participate in those discussions, and I would offer both developers the opportunity, if you'd wish to contact me, to make my offices available to do that. In fact, I would look forward to it.
Let's try to do this right now. Is there an interest in doing that, you guys?
Yes.
What about? We're putting you on the spot, I know.
Absolutely. We just don't know when.
After Easter sometime? We have a holiday coming up this weekend, but I will make myself available at your convenience, weekends, evenings.
Appreciate that.
So I'd like to help to assist to bring this to a conclusion that benefits all three parties here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay. So we're not going to have a vote tonight.
So we need to table that.
Mr. Chairman, may I just remind you that according to the ordinance,
Yes.
which refers to 941 in the code, planning commission has to review, can hear it tonight or can pass it, but you must reconsider it within 45 city working days from the date of tonight. Which
So
my
our
initial
next meeting-
calculation here was June 14th would be the 45th day, but that doesn't take into account any holidays which are not city working days. So we'd have to figure out the exact date. I'm sure there's a Memorial Day off or something, but at the very latest, it would be around June 14th. But certainly you can hear it before.
We have a May meeting, correct?
Yeah.
May 10th.
Is that enough time for you guys?
Do you know the date of that?
May 10th.
Is that enough time?
For the economic projections? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the date. So.
May, our next meeting is May 10th? May 10th?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right, just so we stay, we think our absolute deadline date is sometime in June, but we'd rather do it in May. If we can. Okay. Have a motion to, do we need to table, Chris?
I think we need to table.
Yes.
Have a motion?
I'll make a motion to table the new business agenda item, Rockside Crossings at Seven Hills, amendment to the conceptual preliminary plan submitted and approved by the Planning Commission on November 10th, 2016.
Second.
We need all three to vote. Go ahead, Terry.
Mr. Ruffo?
Yes.
Mr. Breida?
Yes.
Mr. McCafferty?
Yes.
Mr. Lobus?
Yes.
Okay. All right, motion to,
Make a motion to adjourn.
before I do, just really, very quickly. Any comments from the planning commission members?
No.
And I keep asking that question, it's a broken record there. Next, our next regularly scheduled meeting is May 10th, 2017. And a motion for adjournment, please.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Mr. Breida?
Yes.
Mr. McCafferty?
Yes.
Mr. Ruffo?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Thank you all.